After earlier surveys by income tax officials on the BBC offices in Delhi and Mumbai, now ED heat on BBC. ED is probing alleged foreign exchange violations by BBC India. Let's go across to Arvind for more on this. Arvind, give us more details. And officials from BBC are being questioned.
Gargi, the Enforcement Directorate has initiated an investigation under the Foreign Exchange Management Act. Foreign Exchange Management Act is more of a civil proceeding, unlike you compare it with the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, whereas PMLA, the Prevention of Money Laundering Act or the money laundering case, is more of a criminal investigation. So FEMA is purely a civil proceeding. No one can be arrested and no one can even be questioned in a case of FEMA. So in this particular case, what our sources are saying is that during the course of the examination, the agency has got to know that there are some alleged violations when it comes to foreign remittances between BBC India and the parent BBC group. Some of the financial transactions that have taken place between BBC India and BBC parent group are under the scrutiny of the Enforcement Directorate. So the Enforcement Directorate in the last 2 months, they had asked the BBC India officials to submit all the books of accounts and also financial transactions between BBC India and also BBC parent group, and that's currently being examined by the agency. So because FEMA is a civil proceeding, no one can be summoned or no one can be questioned like how the agency questions under Section 50 of PMLA, the money laundering investigation. So the agency is looking into alleged violation in connection with the foreign exchange between BBC India and BBC parent group, and if at all, if the agency gets to come to a conclusion that there seems to be some kind of a violation of the FEMA Act, that is Foreign Exchange Management Act, then the agency can impose a fine or penalty in this particular case, but there cannot be any criminal proceeding against BBC, at least because no PMLA case, this is purely a FEMA case. But the agency taking cognizance of Income Tax Department's rates, Income Tax Department survey and the inputs from Income Tax Department is currently looking into alleged violation, FEMA violation by BBC India.
All right, so interesting to note that, Arvind, you're saying officials cannot be summoned, but it's the ED has sought books of accounts and financial statements from BBC India. Now, earlier we do know that IT officials also visited the premises of BBC in Delhi and Mumbai. And, is this any way related? We've seen in the past as well, when one agency investigates, then the other agency also seems to open in a line of investigation.
Though Enforcement Directorate officials maintain that even before the Income Tax Department conducted surveys at the premises of BBC India, they started this a process or a procedure of looking into the books of accounts of BBC India. But Gargi, the Income Tax Department certainly after the survey would have shared some kind of information with the Enforcement Directorate. That's where what we are seeing is that after the Income Tax Department survey, what we are seeing is that the Enforcement Directorate asking the officials of BBC India to submit books of accounts and also financial statements of BBC India. So it clearly it's connected. No way we can say that both the agencies are working on a standalone basis. They are working in tandem. That's where the Income Tax Department also shared some kind of inputs on the financial statements of BBC India to Enforcement Directorate. But this comes at a time when there have been several questions or criticism from across the country over the Income Tax Department survey at BBC India. But the Enforcement Directorate sources maintain that as of this moment, they are just looking into the books of accounts of BBC India, which is purely well within the rights, and no fine or penalty has been imposed as of this moment. Officials of BBC India are being called with the books of accounts, and they are submitting the books of accounts. They are also cooperating with the procedure, and the FEMA procedure or the FEMA matter is currently being investigated by the Enforcement Directorate.
Right. And Arvind, when the IT officials had visited the BBC offices at that time, we had seen the opposition, the Editors Guild of India also hitting out over that action on BBC, and it was seen to be connected to the documentary that BBC had released on the 2002 riots that took place in Gujarat at the time when Narendra Modi was the chief minister. So it was seen as connected to that, given that the government worked so hard to prevent that documentary from being seen in India, and then to have the IT officials landing up at the BBC offices and asking all sorts of questions. And now we have this ED probe as well.
Yeah, Gargi, if you could remember, after the BBC had the documentary on Gujarat riots, 2002 Gujarat riots, and that's just days after that documentary we saw Income Tax Department carrying out a survey operation. But at the end of survey operation, also Income Tax Department also gave a detailed statement saying that during the course of this particular survey operation, the agency has got to know several violations, including tax evasion by BBC India, and also mainly they focused on this particular foreign remittances between BBC India and BBC Parent Group. According to the Income Tax Department, that hundreds of crores were remitted by BBC India to BBC Parent Group under the guise of services, and that's why the agency said that all these are under the scrutiny because this seems to be a case of tax evasion. That was the stand of Income Tax Department at that particular point of time, because in that particular statement also Income Tax Department mostly focused on this foreign remittances of BBC India, and that's why the Enforcement Directorate, which has the original jurisdiction under the FEMA, which is the competent authority to look into the Foreign Exchange Management Act violation in this particular case, has initiated the investigation into the alleged FEMA violation done by BBC India.